Did you know the latest court ruling could completely reshape how we view the Second Amendment? Today we're diving into a critical decision from the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit that has major implications for gun rights, particularly for younger Americans. This is a win that we, as 2A supporters, need to understand and leverage. Now let's get into the heart of the matter. The Lohr v. Pennsylvania case directly challenges the narrative pushed by anti-2A advocates and reinforces a crucial principle. The Second Amendment isn't some relic of the past. It's as relevant and necessary today as it was in 1791. This ruling does more than uphold the rights of 18 to 20-year-olds. It sends a strong message about the enduring power of our constitutional freedoms. Let's break down the Lohr v. Pennsylvania case and why it's such a big deal. In Pennsylvania, there was a law that restricted 18, 19, and 20-year-olds from carrying firearms in public during states of emergency. The law essentially made it impossible for them to obtain concealed carry permits due to their age and also banned open carry during these emergencies. That means, in practical terms, young adults were effectively disarmed in some of the most critical situations. The case challenged this restriction, arguing that it violated the Second Amendment rights of young adults. And here's the kicker. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. In their decision, they ruled that these age-based restrictions were unconstitutional, affirming that the Second Amendment applies to all American adults, regardless of their age. This case is important because it goes beyond Pennsylvania. It's part of a broader fight over who gets to exercise their Second Amendment rights and under what conditions. The anti-gun movement often tries to limit gun ownership by creating carve-outs, whether by age, location, or circumstances like emergencies. This decision pushes back against that trend, saying loud and clear that the Second Amendment doesn't come with an asterisk. What makes this case particularly interesting is how the court tied its reasoning to the Supreme Court's recent decision in United States v. Rahimi. The court emphasized that the Second Amendment isn't trapped in amber, frozen in time. Instead, it evolves to protect the rights of all Americans as society changes. This decision is a major step forward in ensuring that young adults have the same rights as anyone else to defend themselves and exercise their constitutional freedoms. By addressing the age-based restrictions head-on, the court has paved the way for future challenges to laws that unfairly limit gun rights. This is a victory not just for young gun owners, but for every 2A supporter who believes in the unalienable right to keep and bear arms. To fully understand the impact of this case, we need to dig into some key language from the Supreme Court's United States v. Rahimi decision. This is where Chief Justice John Roberts used the now famous phrase, "law trapped in amber." Anti-gun advocates have latched onto this phrase, twisting it to suggest that modern regulations are perfectly acceptable under the Second Amendment. But that's not what the court intended. Let me explain. The phrase comes from a discussion in Rahimi about how the Second Amendment should be interpreted using historical principles. Chief Justice Roberts made it clear that the Second Amendment isn't frozen in time, protecting only muskets and sabers. Instead, it extends to modern arms and technologies, anything that can be considered a bearable arm. His point was that the principles of 1791 must evolve to address the realities of today. That's a win for us, not them. The anti-gun crowd, however, is trying to argue the opposite. They claim this phrase gives states the flexibility to impose sweeping new gun regulations because the law isn't trapped in amber. But if you read the decision carefully, it's clear Roberts wasn't endorsing more regulation. He was making the case for expanding Second Amendment protections to modern firearms and ammunition, ensuring our rights are preserved in the 21st century. Here's why this matters. This language isn't a loophole for gun control. It's a shield against it. It affirms that just as modern weapons fall under the Second Amendment's protection, so do modern interpretations of who gets to exercise these rights. This ties directly into the Lohr case, where the court rejected the idea that 18 to 20-year-olds could be excluded from constitutional protections based on outdated views of adulthood. So, whenever you hear someone use the "law trapped in amber" phrase to justify gun control, remember this. The court used it to expand freedoms, not limit them. This language is a tool for protecting rights in a modern world, not a justification for restricting them. Let's take a closer look at how this concept, "law trapped in amber," strengthens our Second Amendment rights. The idea is simple but powerful. The protections established in 1791 weren't meant to remain static. They were designed to grow alongside our society, ensuring that the core principles of individual freedom and self-defense adapt to new realities. One clear implication of this is the protection of modern firearms and ammunition. At the time of the founding, the weapons available were muskets and flintlock pistols. Today, we have semi-automatic rifles, handguns, and other advanced tools for self-defense. According to Chief Justice Roberts, these modern arms are just as protected under the Second Amendment as the weapons of 1791. That's because the right isn't about the specific technology, it's about the principle of self-defense. But this concept doesn't stop with weapons. It also applies to who gets to exercise these rights. At the time of the founding, the people referenced in the Constitution largely meant white male property owners. Today, the people includes every American citizen, regardless of race, gender, or property ownership. The Third Circuit made this point crystal clear in the Lohr decision, rejecting arguments that historical exclusions from the Second Amendment should carry forward into modern times. The phrase "law trapped in amber" also dismantles a common anti-2A argument about age restrictions. Some opponents of gun rights claim that because minors in 1791 were treated differently under the law, 18 to 20-year-olds today can be excluded from full Second Amendment protections. But this argument doesn't hold up. In today's world, 18 to 20-year-olds are considered adults. They can vote, sign contracts, serve in the military, and more. The court's reasoning in Rahimi supports the idea that modern interpretations of adulthood must inform how we apply constitutional rights. This principle has far-reaching implications. It means that any law restricting gun rights must be grounded in the original principles of the Second Amendment while accounting for modern realities. It's a powerful tool for challenging unconstitutional regulations and ensuring that our rights remain robust and relevant. The bottom line is this: the law trapped in amber concept isn't a limitation. It's a call to expand freedom. It ensures that the Second Amendment evolves to meet the needs of today's citizens while staying true to its original purpose. This is why the Third Circuit's decision in Lohr is such a game-changer. It reaffirms that the protections enshrined in the Constitution aren't stuck in the past. They're alive, dynamic, and ready to defend our rights in the modern era. Now let's dig into the heart of the Third Circuit's decision in the Lohr case and why it's so significant for Second Amendment rights. The court didn't just rule in favor of 18 to 20-year-olds carrying firearms, they laid out a powerful framework for defending our rights against overreach. This decision isn't just a win, it's a blueprint for future victories. One of the most critical aspects of the ruling is how the court interpreted the phrase "the people." Historically, the definition of "the people" in 1791 was limited to white male property owners. That was the societal norm back then, but it's not how we interpret the Constitution today. The Third Circuit made it clear that the protections of the Second Amendment apply to all Americans. They explicitly rejected the idea that we should be locked into 18th century definitions of who qualifies for constitutional rights. The court also addressed the argument that minors in 1791 didn't have full rights, so 18 to 20-year-olds today can be excluded from the Second Amendment. They dismantled this claim by pointing out that today's legal and societal standards have evolved. In modern America, 18 to 20-year-olds are adults. They can vote, serve in the military, sign contracts, and make life-changing decisions. Denying them their Second Amendment rights simply doesn't align with today's legal framework. What really stood out in this decision was the court's emphasis on the Second Amendment's adaptability. They pointed to Chief Justice Roberts' "law trapped in amber" language from Rahimi, using it to argue that the principles of 1791 extend to modern contexts. This wasn't just a win for young adults. It was a reaffirmation that the Second Amendment is a living, breathing part of our Constitution. This ruling also sets a precedent that could impact other cases. For example, challenges to state laws restricting magazine capacities or banning certain types of firearms could draw on the reasoning in Lohr. If the Second Amendment applies to all adults in modern firearms, then these restrictions face an uphill battle. The Third Circuit's decision is more than a single victory. It's a declaration that the Second Amendment remains a robust protection against government overreach. It's a reminder that our rights aren't frozen in time, but evolve to meet the needs of today's citizens. This ruling is a critical step forward, and we need to keep building on this momentum. Let's talk about the anti-gun narratives that have been circulating, especially in light of this ruling. One of the most common arguments is that the Second Amendment should allow for more gun control because society has changed since 1791. They point to Chief Justice Roberts' law trapped in amber phrase as justification for modern restrictions, but this interpretation completely misses the point. The anti-2A movement wants you to believe that this language gives the government free rein to impose regulations that didn't exist at the time of the founding. They argue that because technology and society have evolved, gun control laws should evolve too. But the real meaning behind this phrase is exactly the opposite. The court made it clear that modern arms and ammunition are protected because the Second Amendment adapts to new realities while staying true to its original principles. The Lohr case is a perfect example of how this logic works in our favor. The court recognized that while historical context is important, the Constitution isn't frozen in the past. Instead, it ensures that rights are protected for all Americans, in every era. This includes young adults, modern firearms, and any other aspect of self-defense that aligns with the Second Amendment's core principles. Whenever you hear these anti-2A arguments, remember this: the Constitution wasn't designed to limit freedom. It was designed to preserve it. The Lohr decision is proof that our rights can withstand the test of time and adapt to modern challenges without losing their original intent. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with an important message. Staying informed is one of the best ways to protect your rights. Decisions like Lohr v. Pennsylvania and Rahimi are game changers, but they're only the beginning. We need to remain vigilant, educated, and united as a community to ensure these victories keep coming. The fight for the Second Amendment is far from over, but together we can make a difference. Victories like the Lohr case remind us that the Constitution is on our side, and the courts are starting to recognize that. Let's keep the momentum going, stay engaged, and continue to fight for the freedoms that make this country great. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep fighting for 2A.